All right, thanks. Welcome everybody, and thank you very much for coming and sharing some of this sunny Saturday with us. It's not surprising after what we saw yesterday, but and I was saying this to anybody who listened last night, but for a town of this size and for a beautiful weekend in June, to see this kind of turnout is pretty remarkable. This is my ninth charrette, and relative to against the size of the community, this is the best I've seen in terms of turnout. So it's really wonderful and invigorating. It's exciting for us. So thank you. I'm Rob Dappas. I'm the president of the board of directors for Plain, New Hampshire, and one of the leaders of this charrette. I'm just going to get things kicked off with a quick introduction, and then I'll hand it over to the talent here for the real meat of the presentation. Before I do that, I want to thank the local team that brought us here. And usually when I do this, I forget somebody and then I offend them, so I'm going to try not to do that. But if I forgot you, I'm sorry. Debbie, Virginia, Lynn, Glenn, Ellie, Ernie, Walt, Stacy, Ellen, and the Board of Selectmen, the School Board, the Heritage Commission, the HDC, the Planning Board, and the Conservation Commission, in addition to all the great sponsors and donors up here. A lot of work goes into bringing a charrette to town, and we really appreciate all that you put into this to make this effort. Okay, next I want to introduce our charrette team. And Robin LeBlanc is our lone full-time staff member in New Hampshire, and she unfortunately is our executive director. She couldn't be here, she had to leave a little early, so we're sorry to miss her. But if the rest of the team could stand up, please, I'll introduce you in turn. So Michelle McDonald back there is trying to hide. Everybody say hello to Michelle. She's a part-time staff member and does a lot of volunteering too, which I think is illegal, but she's very valuable for our organization and our mission. So thank you, Michelle. And then from the left here, Joe Johnson, our co-leader. We'll be hearing more from all of you guys shortly. And the traffic engineer with Green and Peterson. Ross Moldoff, the planner for the town of Salem, and a repeat offender, charrette MVP. Cheryl Killam, with recently retired, formerly with the state of New Hampshire, an SFC engineering and accessibility specialist, also a Kingston resident, Newton resident, I'm sorry. Jen Martell, landscape architect with Ironwood Design in Portsmouth. Bob White with Green and Peterson as well, Portsmouth, landscape architect. Bev Mason with USDA Rural Development in Concord. Nadine Miller with the State Department of Historical Resources, and Brian Murphy, architect with Murphy Manipini Architects in Portsmouth. And I work for New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority. All of us are volunteers, and so these guys are, could be billing their time out in the triple digits, and they provide a great service, and so please give these volunteers a round of applause. Okay, so before I hand it over to Joe, I just want to give you a quick background on who we are and why we're here as an organization. Plain, New Hampshire is a 501c3 statewide nonprofit. Our mission is to foster excellence in the planning, design, and development of the built environment in New Hampshire. We were started about 26 years ago now as an offshoot of the American Institute of Architects in New Hampshire. And the charrette program is kind of our signature program. It's probably what we're known best for, but it's one of several programs that we run. We administer scholarships and fellowship aid to New Hampshire students who are studying design, engineering, and planning fields of study. And we award annual merit awards to development projects that exhibit the sort of excellence that we encourage. We're also now administering the Municipal Technical Assistance Grant, which is something you guys may want to know about, which assists municipalities that are looking to update their rules and regulations to make their towns more housing friendly. The charrette process is something that, as I said, it's been going on for about 25 years. We do a couple of these every year, and there's an application process. So the town of Kingston submitted an application describing what the community wanted to get out of this process. And several of us came in for an interview in January, and there was our first opportunity to be impressed by the turnout that you guys could produce, because I think about 20 people were in that interview representing the various stakeholder organizations. and talking about the challenges you folks have faced in the village, in particular, of course, the seminary, but also several other precious and historic properties, and your desire to revitalize the economy, to sort of return a sense of place to the village of Kingston, and also to figure out what to do to preserve these properties. So we, once we accepted the application, we started putting together a team of professionals with the skills to make this charrette a success. And it's a 2-day process. Essentially, we come in with little in the way of background knowledge of this, of the particulars of this area. We had the application, and we were provided with a lot of the work that had gone before. But for the most part, we want to come in with something of a blank slate and listen to what you guys have to say on Friday, what you tell us about what you want your community to look like, and what you hope for not just the places, but the people of Kingston. So, with that information, we come back in Saturday morning and we work to turn those ideas into concepts that can be illustrated and described, and we focus on the not just the what in terms of the things that you'd like to see, but the how. And, you know, while we can't give you a specific roadmap that will guide you to implementing exactly what you hope to see, we'll hope to give you some ideas and some examples where similar things have worked in the past. So with that, I think, just so you know what you're in for, I'm going to hand it over to Joe now, and he's going to talk a little bit about what we heard from you folks yesterday, and then the rest of the team will talk about some of the major themes we heard. Ross is going to discuss communication and marketing. Jen and Bob are going to talk about the planes. Bev and I are going to talk a little bit about other assets and properties in and around the village, and then Brian and Nadine will discuss the seminary itself, and then we'll have some time for questions. With that, Joe, take it away.
Thank you very much, Rob. So, as Rob mentioned, we did a lot of listening yesterday. We heard a lot from you guys, and it was very impressive how involved you guys are, how much you care about your town center. So that was really a great testimony of this type of community. It's awesome. So some of the things you identified as valuable to you, having the feeling of safety here in this community, the history, particularly in your town center. You were concerned about communication and the importance of having good communication. Being inclusive of families, being inclusive of those who might be, retirement age, getting the elderly, being inclusive of everyone. Also the school, the social connection, you've really valued your town center and having a sense of community. So some of our community-wide observations, which kind of worked off of what your input was and what we observed as a team, there was a lack of identity and branding in town. You're looking for a sense of community, a need to identify community assets, and how to make them sustainable. There was a focus on families, as I mentioned. There was a lack of communication that was a point of frustration for many folks in terms of the decisions being made in town and not necessarily projecting that information out to the residents. There was concern about the housing, the desire to use historic value to its maximum. You have some vacant buildings, and the hope was, how can we repurpose these and make them an asset to the community? And also, of course, a need for job opportunities. And you really were looking for a welcoming communication to your town center to identify it so that folks don't just drive by without even knowing it's there. There was a desire for Kingston to be a destination, that people want to come here for a purpose. There's a lack of place. The seminary building was a huge concern, it was a huge issue. Lack of leadership from community development leader to a coordination and communication person. Again, it was that communication role that there was, seemed to be a lack of getting information out to the citizens. There's a variety of individual small decisions. I'm sorry, I'm reading some of this, but this came together pretty quickly this morning. some small decisions that happen individually, such as the library leaving the town center, and what was the other building that left? The school, of course. And these decisions had a big overall effect, but they weren't thought about in a global perspective necessarily. So to solve some of these issues, I'm going to hand it over to Ross, and he's going to start talking about the marketing communications.
Thank you, Joe. I'm Ross Waldoff. I'm the planning director in Salem, New Hampshire, and I've held that job for 33 years. And I want to tell you that I've worked with hundreds of board members and planning board, conservation commission, zoning board, selectmen and whatnot. And I just have been so impressed with the people that we've met here and that we were able to work with. And I've also been so impressed with the passion of the people, the residents that we met with yesterday for the community. So many people cared about the community. And I think you're very fortunate to have that. That's an incredible asset. That may be the best asset that you have in the community, the people that are so concerned about the future of Kingston and the plans and the seminary building. So I congratulate you on that. The only complaint I have is that I believe Virginia promised that we would have ice cream today, and I haven't seen the ice cream yet. Virginia, is that coming afterwards? Okay, from what because I like ice cream. After I have to make the presentation, and then I get the ice cream. I like ice cream. So we were charged with looking at marketing and communications. That's one of the issues that we heard yesterday from the residents, lack of communication, poor communication, and it takes all different sorts of forms, and we wanted to give you some ideas for what we had. What do you want to market? Obviously, the Kingston story, we think, is a great story. The New England village charm that you have is very impressive to all of us that were here. You've got historic buildings that a lot of communities don't have anywhere near the historic buildings that you have. The whole plains, the idea of a town common running for half a mile in the center of town. Again, a lot of places, Salem included, can't say that we have anything like that. You have a lot more than that. You've got the state park, you've got lakes, you've got trails. You've got a unique sense of place here, and that's something that we heard from the people yesterday also. And that's really the branding of your community. So what are the goals? What would you like to see accomplished? What we heard was we'd like to bring in visitors, certainly day trippers, people who are coming to the parks, but also the whole concept of heritage or historic tourism. You may not think about this because it's an asset that maybe you take for granted, I don't know, but these historic homes, the seminary, are something that people would love to come to see and look at and explore. Going inside the seminary was a real treat for those of us that got to do that yesterday. Hearing about the JOSIAH Bartlett house, absolutely fabulous. We went over today and took a look at the tree, the story of the tree that was given to them. Yeah, these are incredible stories that not many communities in New Hampshire, let alone the country. I think Glenn Greenwood said there were only 4 of those trees left in the country. We think people would come to see that, and we think that's something that you should think about. The idea of having weddings on the church, and then perhaps having functions or events on the plains, the idea of having people come in and visiting some of the historic houses. What do you need to accomplish that? You'd need some lodging. People would want a place to stay. They might travel. It's a day trip, obviously, but some people might want to stay here. You'd want other things for them to do, things like utilizing the park that you have, the lakes, kayaking, biking, walking. You'll hear more about the idea of walking trails later, places for people to eat ice cream. Coffee. I'm going to be known as the ice cream guy, but that's not the greatest reputation, I guess. Meals and pubs and things like that. You have some of that already, obviously. We heard last night a strong desire to keep and attract young people here and to have more activities for young people. And how can you do that? Well, one thing is you need obviously decent and affordable places to live. You have to have things for the people to do and the young people to do when they get here, places where they might be able to hang out, and outdoor activities, which you already have a lot of here. What could we suggest that might help you accomplish some of these goals and do some of the things that you want? We talked about the idea, you have a lot of volunteers and they do tremendous work. We heard about Kingston Days and all the work that it takes to put that together, which is tremendous, and to think that volunteers are doing that is really tremendous. But how could you do things like that? Does it make sense to get somebody, even on a very part-time basis, to come in and market those events and communicate with people about those types of events? We looked at your webpage, which is good, by the way. We noted a lot of information on there. Maybe you could do more things you could add to the webpage. The idea of putting that walking map of the historic district on the webpage would be great. I think people would really like that. I think Virginia or somebody talked about a video walking tour. It'd be great to put that on there so people could see that. We know that there's a lot of information that already comes out in the village or in the Carriage Town News, and making sure that that's linked up to your webpage. There was some talk, there was a good discussion yesterday, although I'm sure a difficult discussion for some of you, about development in the town and bringing in new businesses, and some people said it's too difficult to do that, and so what can you do about that? Obviously some people maybe want to keep things the way they are. You could take a look at your zoning regulations. The Rockingham Planning Commission, Glenn Greenwood was here yesterday, I'm sure he could help with all that. I've got some ideas just looking through zoning, and I've talked with some people about that. Is the zoning supportive of what you want to accomplish? We can't tell you that. You have to decide that for yourselves. We could give you some ideas for some things that you might want to do, and we'll probably put those in our report. But we also talked about the idea of surveying people to discover what you want or what you need. You can do online surveys, relatively easy to do these days. You could do paper surveys. You could use even focus groups where you sit down, kind of like what we did, sit down with a group of local officials and see what they're hoping to accomplish, see what their desires are. Those were our recommendations for marketing and communications. And the last thing I talked about was signage, the idea of signage and wayfinding, and having people that might be driving through or coming here for the first time, being aware of what's here and the assets that you have. The idea of maybe welcome to or entering historic Kingston, or welcome to the historic district in Kingston on the entrances, on the approaches. You have a beautiful historic marker in front of the JOSIAH Bartlett House, and I'd only say that for 30 years I've been going up and down from Salem to Exeter. My parents had lived there for a while, and I just had never seen the sign before. It's kind of set back a little bit, and I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying, well, maybe there are other things you could do. You could put signs closer to the roads, announcing the state park, promoting and indicating the location of trails and beaches and boating opportunities, putting trail maps online, or having paper copies of them in kiosks in different areas. And the idea of a public restroom came up, and I know there's facilities at the fire department. Maybe there are other places where you would want to develop something like that also. So those were some of the recommendations. And now I'm going to get over to someone else.
Plains team is going to talk a little bit first, right? You guys didn't have any PowerPoints, right? Good talking about it. Yeah, you want to
So we're going to talk talk really briefly about transportation, and it's kind of interesting. Usually at these charrettes, the driving factor and a lot of times is traffic and issues with traffic, and surprisingly enough, that didn't come up much yesterday. There is not a lot of traffic out here on Main Street, which is good. It works well. Like you said, that can be plus. There's pros and cons to that. But when we think about transportation now, we're thinking about all modes of transportation. So we're talking about vehicles, pedestrians, and bikes. So you guys have a nice shoulder along Main Street for biking. It's pretty suitable for biking. You're missing certainly the pedestrian accommodations. There's no sidewalk. One thing I certainly noticed out there is the travel speeds of vehicles. So cars are driving pretty quickly out that way. So what we try to introduce along this corridor are some opportunities to traffic calm. And what we did is at locations of prominent crosswalk locations, we introduced like a refuge island that may be difficult to see on this map. But basically where there's crosswalk locations, we will put a median island in the center so that it's a two-step crossing. It's for safety for pedestrians to go halfway of the road, get to a refuge, and then continue. Given that you don't have a lot of volume out here, that's not the driving factor of safety, but that will slow vehicles down because it's restricting the road a little bit. So by doing that throughout the corridor, we can create kind of a traffic calming effect. We also took a look at the Depot Street intersection, and Bob's going to talk about that a little bit, but we reconfigured that considerably, and I'll let him talk about that in just a moment. So, getting back to complete streets and providing accommodation, we're looking to, our thought was to suggest sidewalks on both sides of the road, starting at the school and heading down to the town hall. At that point, we'd have sidewalks which are basically buffered from the roadway by 6-8 feet wide. So you have a nice grass strip, and the pedestrian feels a good sense of safety and comfort because they're not right up against the travel lane. And this is a great opportunity. Obviously, you have the school here. You have whatever use may come in at the seminary location, and that ties them into this area here, to the town hall. We have some crosswalks in these areas. Again, opportunities to slow vehicles down. Then once we get to the plains, we're providing a path connection to the plains, and Jen will talk about that in just a second. Just also wanted to mention, based on what Ross was mentioning with wayfinding. So, maybe some signage in this area to direct folks to the historic town center, to the park. You have great biking opportunities down Rockman Road, that are down a ways, down that way, but folks don't know about it. So maybe we can just provide some signage. That would be our recommendation, is to let people know where these assets are. And also from the south, we could also recommend some signage from that direction as well. So at this point, I'm going to let Bob talk briefly about the intersection reconfiguration.
Okay, so I'll just back up briefly. I've never been to Kingston before. I only knew, prior to today, I only knew one person from Kingston, but as Brian and I came down this morning, we came around the corner and approached the green. I said, wow, that's a nice green. And then it went on and on and on and on. You have an amazing green. And for a while I was up in the Upper Valley, and the Orford Green along the Connecticut River is a pretty awesome green. You just squash Orford. I'm sorry, Orford's, and there's nice people in Orford, but your green is an amazing place. So this is our challenge, is we know you love your green. And it's easy to fall in love with immediately. I fell in love with your green at 8:05 this morning, and it's been a love affair all day. And so our challenge on this is, how can we keep everything that is perfect and beautiful about it, and then look for, if we need to, make some slight adjustments, but just to keep that in mind is to be really, really good to it. So the thing that really jumped out to us, and maybe it was because I came into town from the north, was like, there should be a sense of exhilarating and truly awe-inspiring arrival at the green. And so we are challenged on the north end, right by Depot Street. because we've got the plaza, we've got, it's not as beautiful as everything else around it. And so we had to sort of screw up our courage because we're going to challenge you with a different viewpoint of how to look at Depot Street and this sort of area right out here. And so there's a lot of pavement out here. You don't have a lot of traffic, you don't need all that pavement. We would rather give you more and more and more green and give you more and more opportunities to get your 10,000 steps in a day by having a nice walkway around the green. I haven't gotten out there to do the full 10,000 steps, but I'm sure by the time I go back, down and back, I will probably have achieved it for the day. So this moment of arrival is really what we're after. Thank you, Joe. So we, as I said, we sort of screwed up our courage on this, and so bear with us, we may challenge you. But what we wanted to do was, we looked at all the paving and said, do we need all the paving? Functionally, what do we need to do for people to get around the village? Functionally, what do we need to do to have the intersections feel safe, not only for people in their car, but for people walking around, people biking around, so that when people come here, is that they step out of their car and they feel like they've just set foot into heaven. So that's what we're after. That's a pretty high aspiration, but it's a celestial aspiration. So what we've done is, we had a couple folks that were walking around there yesterday, and the existing, the existing configuration of Depot Street and Church Street in the end of the green, and the crossover here, which sort of comes slamming into the plaza. As we looked at all this, like, wow, that's a lot of pavement. Maybe we can take some of that away and give it back to green space, clean up circulation in a way that just works a little different. And so that's what we went after. So we went out and sort of did a check this morning and said, well, what if we did something as courageous as basically take away this part of Depot Street? We got a driveway, we got to get some people home, but we have maybe some parking to serve as overflow for the church. But do we actually need this sort of raceway? Because these V-shaped, in each of these V-shaped intersections, you can take that curve at 60 miles an hour, for sure. Everybody, who's done it? Who's done it? Whose kids have done it? So, and this is how I make my living, on V-shaped intersections. So, and Joe knows about that. So I want to try this out on you. So we take away the through street of Depot. There's a wonderful house right in the middle here that we'd love to see. That could be, that's going to change hands at some point. It's a perfect landmark structure to be repurposed for housing. It's a sort of a lynch, sort of a keystone in the middle of, sort of this part of the village. So what we looked at was take away Depot Street, create a new Depot Street extension that basically comes around here and brings us into the plaza, offset from the existing runway that you have across the street, and basically allow a nice clean cut across and entrance into the plaza, and then do some reconfiguring of the parking in the plaza so there's a nice green space out in front, sidewalks, get everything so that we have sort of a nice walkable core of the museum. We'd love to think that if we do improvements like this, that interest in redeveloping, reoccupying the store will be, we'll sort of set the stage for that with better parking, better access, just make it feel, like a stronger sense of place. Over here on the plaza side, and then returning the walkways over to Town Hall, and then using that as a platform to basically send walkways the entire length of the plains all the way to the other end, where Jen is going to pick up. So these are some of the things that we're looking at here, but we just as if that wasn't enough, we thought we would actually just show that as we take away something, we have new opportunities. So we actually added some additional housing adjacent to the existing house that's out of the intersection here. And this could be a nice affordable housing project. It could be elderly housing. It could be family affordable. It's right in the center of town. It's right connected to sidewalks that would go to the school. And so there are opportunities to infill. in the character of what you like about here, but it's, you know, this is a 21st century building, hopefully looking like it was of the 19th century. So what we're trying to do is clean up circulation, less pavement, more green space, nicer walking, lots of trees that have a, you know, beautiful canopy of trees the whole length, and then set the stage for all this walking connectivity to the school, and then for the rest of the planes. And then Jen's half a mile away, she's on the other end of the green, she's going to tell you how we get from here to there.
Hi, so I'm a landscape architect, and usually I'm looking at sites and I'm looking for opportunities to create more green space. And I come to Kingston and you guys have this enormous, beautiful green space, and my job is done. So we did hear a few suggestions for improvements that we tried to incorporate into the plan. And also what we were looking at is really trying to connect everyone into the green space and make it really easy to get from the neighborhoods and from the park to the green space and vice versa. Really making the park a more walkable, usable, functional space. All the while keeping the big open green lawns that are used for fairs and festivals and things like that. So, like Bob mentioned and Joe alluded to, we did create some sidewalks along the side of the road to improve connectivity to the elementary school and the seminary building. And then you would arrive at this new reconfigured intersection that sort of like highlights some of the historic buildings and the general store in this area. And then from there, the sidewalks end kind of at the town hall, but you come to a central space that then you can continue your journey on a pathway. It would be a nice, wide, generous stone dust pathway that would then carry you all the way down the park. And one thing I wanted to mention, I don't know if Bob said this, but the reconfiguration, we actually removed one of the cut-through streets. So this last section of park from Rockrimmon Road down to Depot Street is now a continuous section rather than being broken up, and there's this last little chunk of kind of stormwater basin that's not really usable. So now it would be a continuous functional space. So you pick up the stone dust pathway, which then starts to split. It brings you to the revised bandstand, and it continues to split, and then it becomes basically two paths on either side of the greens, all the way down to the last kind of triangular parcel of the park, which I'll talk about in a minute. But what this allows you to do is to do a loop. You know, you could do one loop, it's a mile, 2 loops, 2 miles. It's a great kind of way to get measured exercise in. And along that generous stone dust path, I would definitely recommend adding some benches and some seating. I know there are some benches out there now, but just kind of taking a look at maybe just some very simple site furnishings so that people can stop and rest. And then this last triangular parcel, we really see as kind of a great little linchpin in the whole park system, because number one, it's the southern gateway to the historic district, so you could add some signage and really nice planting here that says, welcome to historic Kingston Village. It also becomes the connection from the park, and therefore sort of the downtown area, to the state park, which we believe is like a really tremendous asset that I think if more people knew about and was a little bit more accessible, that you would get people coming to Kingston a lot more often just to use the state park. So we are suggesting a few revisions to the state park entrance. We would suggest that the state actually move the gate into the park a little bit further, or remove the gate altogether. We're not really sure why it's necessary. But create a small parking area at the entrance to the park, and then a crosswalk over to the plains from the state park, so that people could get over there. We're also suggesting putting a playground at the state park. I mean, there's nothing that attracts families more than a downtown, colorful, active playground and rec space. We're also suggesting a small parking lot that would provide handicap accessible parking to the planes, which currently doesn't exist, as well as sort of a more sheltered parking area for people with young kids who don't necessarily want to park on the side of the road and be getting their kids out of the car seat as cars are whipping by 50 miles an hour. And then this also becomes a really great place for a small bathroom facility that would serve the planes, either year-round or seasonal. And finally, we think this would be a great place for a picnic grove, so people could actually come and park and bring a picnic and sit under the tree, and their kids can play on the playground, all within this area. So this is really the most like kind of active recreation part of the park, anchoring this end of the plains. And otherwise, besides the path, you've got beautiful trees in the park. I mean, amazing, huge trees that are really healthy. I've also noticed there have been some new trees planted, which is great, so you've got the successional. So just keeping that up and kind of emphasizing the two paths with your trees would be really great, just to provide that shade along the park. And I believe that was about it. I mean, I think otherwise, overall, just creating the connection, we kind of looked at the regional green space, not just in downtown, but you have all this conservation land that could really, I think with signage, people could have, trails connecting all of the green spaces, and you could come, through downtown, through the streets, and up to some of the other conservation lands. And using some signage, I think, to direct people, that would, I think, be a big attractant to the downtown area. Who's next?
Thank you. We're going to do a duet. Okay, so again, this is Bev Mason from.
Can you move that so we can see on this side of that?
Yes, thank you.
Does that do it?
Okay, that's perfect.
All right, Bev and I have worked for a little bit on other important sites and assets around the village center. You got a lot more going on here than just the plains from the seminary. And so, do you want to talk about we haven't had a lot of time to rehearse. Do you want to talk a little bit about the Bartlett House?
Sure. We took, first of all, we didn't take, of course, every asset that you have, but we tried to take the assets that were identified with last night's discussions and maybe come up with some thoughts, ideas, suggestions. And of course, probably the most talked about asset that you have is the Bartlett House across the street. So it's uniquely important to the town, but not just the town, the state, and the country. It must be preserved in its current form. We heard a lot about the tree out front. Feel that the facade and the grounds are something that visitors that come to the town are really going to want to take a look and say, it's as it was years and years ago. We understand that right now it's obviously private ownership, so for the public to take ownership after all of the other items that you have to take care of as a town may not be as feasible as we heard last night. It's really a desire of a lot of people to have control of that asset, but it may not be feasible financially. However, it might be worth the town looking into state funds, whether or not there might be available. There may at some point be a program that would allow you to access some funds, maybe even some federal funds. Again, once you took ownership, you have a fairly large expense maintaining it. So again, it may not be as feasible as other options. And that, again, from what we understood, resources in the town are already maxed out, so it may not be a great option.
Just going to flip the slide. I understand that this might make some of you uneasy, and so we're not presenting this as the only option, but we want to be realistic, and you have an awful lot of incredible buildings and resources here, and so kind of what we're talking about is economizing your efforts. And these are some alternatives that can bring in private investment in order to preserve a place and make it still accessible to the public while also being sustainable in terms of the economy and volunteer efforts. So these are just a couple of examples of commercial uses that may be compatible with the building as it exists. As Bev said, the landscape and the facade can be preserved. Some of the interior obviously will be changed, but this is on the left is a restaurant in Killington, Vermont, in an old house. On the right, that's the Colby Hill Inn and restaurant in Henniker, New Hampshire, which has some lodging upstairs as well. They're both very old houses that have been repurposed to be really nice restaurants that people will travel to. There's just some stuff we wanted to bore you for a little while, so we thought we'd talk about the New Hampshire state laws. RSA 79E is a law that allows towns to grant temporary tax relief for investment in important properties. And so Exeter, Concord, Newmarket have adopted these to pretty good effect. Actually, that picture is in Berlin, but there's people in town who are already aware of this and are considering it. It generally runs 5 or 10 years and can make it more financially feasible for people to put money into a property knowing that they won't get hit with a big tax bill in year one as they're trying to sort of get their business off the ground that's based on the improvements that they have made. And then Ross mentioned zoning. I don't know the details of your current zoning, but after you consider and discuss the various uses that we're suggesting or that you think might be desirable, determine whether your current zoning allows that, and then if it does, work with, is Mrs. Albert here today? Thank you. I mean, I think that we want to respect the stewardship of your family in keeping this incredible property for the people of New Hampshire and the United States. It's an extraordinary resource. And when we suggest these alternate uses, we don't mean any disrespect for that. We're just talking about how this can be sort of carried into the future. So thank you, and thank you for coming today. And of course, if the zoning doesn't support the use that you want to see out of that building, you've got to think about that. Think about your zoning. Next slide.
And then to kind of wrap it up on the Bartlett House, again, if the town was looking to take ownership, the possible funding situation might be either state funding, federal funding. The process would take time, and another use may be needed to preserve the property. So kind of in a nutshell, that's what might be available.
Okay, we saw the fire station in town. It's a really cute fire station, and we understand that it's bursting at the seams. And so we know the fire department's looked at alternatives and perhaps alternative sites that could better meet their needs. And our purpose in putting up a picture of a guy with missing teeth is to illustrate sort of the gradual municipal dilution of services that has occurred not just in Kingston, but in towns all over New Hampshire. Joe mentioned it, the schools moved out of town, the libraries moved out of town. It happens everywhere. People want to be able to park more easily. People want bigger buildings, but it has real consequences over the long term. And it's especially germane for fire departments that are considering a move to some place that can better accommodate their trucks when the mission of fire departments across New Hampshire has really transformed, and a greater and greater percentage of their services are medical calls where the size of the height of your ladder is not especially relevant. And so we don't have a simple solution to that. We understand that there are real challenges with the existing building in terms of life safety and accessibility, and those are tough things to address in a tight old building on a tight site. But we understand that the rescue squad is co-located with the fire department. Perhaps there's an opportunity to locate some of the fire department's equipment in the satellite station, or to team up with is at East Kingston, just so that you can maintain a presence in town and have that sort of visibility. Because it's not just about response time and the ability to handle walk-in medical calls, all that stuff is important, but also the visibility on Main Street is really nice as well. You can sit on the fire station.
So then we moved on to kind of this section out here, the buildings that you currently own and are currently being used for museum purposes. And first thing that we really have recognized throughout the 2 days here is the amount of volunteers that are keeping these facilities going. The amount of time that's being given is very, very obvious. The historical library that's over here in the museums, I think the one thing that if we can continue to, or if we can achieve bringing more visitors into town, would be to recommend, and ultimately I think this would happen, is to open up the museum, open up the library more than it is now. And I think that would naturally happen. Not too many recommendations for changes in any of these, just more encouraging volunteers and encouraging, maybe through the outreach, maybe through the branding, that would increase visibility and thus have more visitors to the locations.
So we heard a little bit about the Grace DALEY barn right here out the window, and the plan that's been proposed by a nonprofit to provide some social services and I believe transitional housing in this location. And I just want to say it's wonderful to hear that that is being considered by this town. It's something that is so needed and will really strengthen communities across New Hampshire if more of that type of housing can be built. So that's wonderful, and we hope that it goes forward. With that, I guess a caveat that it's a really hard thing to pull off adaptive reuse of old houses into multi-unit, small-scale multi-unit residential stuff. It is people all over New Hampshire trying to do it, and it's hard to make the numbers work. So we don't have a backup plan for you, but it's something that we realized that this building was almost lost, and so as the process goes forward, working with this nonprofit to hopefully develop it into some sort of facility that they've proposed, keep thinking about what else you might be able to do on that site.
Then we took a walk down the road to the church on the Plains, and absolutely beautiful, beautiful church. And from what we understand, it's privately owned at this point in time. So what we were thinking is, again, making this a destination point. We've heard about the weddings, we've heard about the activities on the common, and think that this could be an extremely important piece of bringing those activities. Weddings, maybe a community theater, and then when we walked down there today, it was ironic, right across in the Plains, there were a lot of kids playing soccer. And so we were thinking that due to the location of it kind of being in the middle of the Plains, that might be a good spot for some kind of public restrooms. We've heard a lot about that, and do you have them on that end, do you have them on this end? But that seemed to be a fairly center location, and from what we understand, the church doesn't currently have restrooms, so it might be an opportunity to accomplish both. And then the other thought that we had was it might be a great place. Last night we heard about creating some kind of senior center, a place for seniors to go. And with the age of that building and to invite in the seniors, it might be a great place to have some activities. And we've got the school for the youngsters on that end, the school on this end. That might be a great place for some senior activities.
The general store is, it would be great to have a general store there again. And so I think when we talk about bringing that back, we talk about a lot of different sites around the village and realize that some of the other proposed uses that we are suggesting trying to induce around the plains and in the seminary could have a beneficial follow-on effects in terms of providing enough traffic so that the general store is again feasible. As it says there, you can't always choose what kind of private development is going to occur, and general stores can go a lot of different ways. If you're not in a super high-octane tourist area, it's probably going to be essentially a beer and cigarettes type convenience store or a sort of yuppie-friendly coffee shop, bakery type place. And so, if either one of those is okay with you, great. Just try to sort of make sure that the use is allowed, of course, and that the surrounding uses will sort of allow for additional traffic to make that kind of thing more sustainable. If you feel strongly in your town that what you want is a general store that has local produce or baked goods or something like that, then there are models that exist that are sort of co-ops or crowd-funded scenarios, and we'll include some examples of where that's been done around the country in our report that we'll follow up with a few weeks here. But that requires more work on the part of volunteers. Before we hand it over to Team Seminary, I just wanted to say, again, it's so impressive, and I'm aware that when we talk about the efforts that volunteers are making, that we're looking at them here in these chairs. So your efforts are very commendable, and every one of these changes that we're talking about today, or whatever other change that you've dreamed up and would like to see, takes so much work. You guys know it better than we do. And you can't be a champion for 7 causes at once very effectively. None of us can. So when we talk about private development for all these various sites that you might have in your head as something that you'd in an ideal world prefer to have as a town-owned building or a house museum or something like that, please understand it's not because we prioritize private development over everything else. We're just trying to be realistic again about sort of being economical with the human resources that you have in town, however remarkable that they are. None of us can do it all. So with that, I'm going to see what's next. So I'm actually going to give a quick introduction for Jen and, Nadine and Brian put a lot of work into the seminary before, since they sort of focused on the design considerations. I just want to mention something that got discussed a little bit last night. I don't have a slide for it, but Brian and Nadine are going to talk about a couple various redevelopment scenarios for the seminary and the property, and either any of these scenarios would have different benefits for the community and some different drawbacks as well. But any of them is better than demolition. I think most of you would agree. And so something that numerous people brought up in the listening sessions, and I just want to underscore the importance of this, is that any scenario that involves partnering with an outside entity, whether it's a developer, nonprofit, cooperative, an investor, any of that stuff is pretty unlikely to happen unless the structure, how that thing is going to get sold, can get figured out. And so I think that, I don't know this stuff as well as you guys do in terms of the particulars of that, the ownership, but it wouldn't surprise me if the involvement of 2 towns and the school board is as big an obstacle to a developer coming in and turning that into something as is the condition of the building. In other words, even if it were an immaculate building, if they said, this is what I want to do with it, and then it was 2 years of different, votes and two different, a number of different planning, zoning, school board meetings for them to get through, it might never happen. They can't keep their money tied up that way. So, if you can achieve some sort of consensus about a range of possible scenarios that would be acceptable to the town, I think it would really behoove you to consider Ross's input about marketing, and to look to some of the examples of other historic properties that have been repurposed with the assistance of consultants, and I'm not one, so I've got nothing to sell here, but places like Chester College and the old public schools and the elementary schools in Concord, New Hampshire are examples of buildings that have found new life, but you know, it ain't easy. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian and Nadine. Thanks.
So I guess this really is the crowning jewel that we came here to talk about quite a bit. We really had fun with this. We worked with it quite a bit, and we really wanted to take into consideration your talk last night about what you were really hoping for, and we really heard that you were looking for a community-based place. A cultural place where people can go, multi-generational. So we kind of took that into our option 1, where we looked at this as a town-owned site, maybe partnered with the school district to really build on the recreational assets that you have there. So what we've done here is we've drawn up some ideas. We still want to consider the seminary as the primary element that you see when you're coming along the street, walking through there. So we wanted to keep that axis that's there, that's a driveway now, but really turn that into a pedestrian area with trees coming in. We heard you say that the gym is still really important in the fields, so that section of the property would still perhaps be school owned, but we still wanted to see this as sort of a campus feel, and that's one of the nice assets of being option 1, which is town owned. With the recreation, we see a lot of young folks using those fields, and so for the building itself, we really like the idea that you talked about, maybe partnering with some nonprofits or other local groups to create artist workspace. We really see some of the interior spaces of the seminary would be wonderful for dance classes and for maybe drama clubs, so you can drop your child off at the fields while your other kid's working at the dance studio while your grandmother is, you know, doing art in one of the other spots. So we really saw that the multi-generational aspect was really important. Brian, you want to keep kind of going on what some of our from a design perspective?
Yeah, I think to be clear, this isn't really designing the details. This is just some important maybe elements to consider in whatever decisions you're making. In this sketch, you know, it is just a sketch and it's pretty loose. So if you can't read it, we'll answer some questions about it. But you can see that this is the feature event, right? This is where it all started. And we believe that it's important in however this shakes down and however it takes on a new life, that this area is really important to keep it connected to Main Street. And that whatever the relationship is, whatever the model is for reinventing this place, that this really be thought of as part of the building and belonging to the seminary building. And then further, this area here should also be considered, you know, hold on to that open space. And that's, you know, we've already lost some valuable assets there, and there's been some misfortune there. And whatever happens, there could be lots of possibilities, but really to preserve that open space is going to be important to everything involved here, to the recreation fields and the connection back to the gym and the school, and how these things all kind of hang together as a canvas. So that's just something to consider in the process.
We heard community gardens and those types of natural features would be really nice, so certainly that area there could be community gardens. We love the location with the elementary school. There could be some cross-fertilization with kids coming over and working in the gardens. One of the things we considered, again, with the building is that there's some beautiful spaces on the inside, and I think having it be a town-owned or partnered with some nonprofits keeps those spaces a little bit more intact. We're going to talk a little bit about private development, which probably would break up those interior spaces due to the financial aspects of things. What we saw here to make this work more as well is to bring in possibly some commercial, some new construction onto the site. As Brian said, the whole front section we really see as open, but behind the building and where the older 1960s school is, perhaps the idea would be to be able to tear that down, build something new in there that could be supporting these activities, maybe a coffee shop too, or some sort of stores that would do with recreation, etc. And because you had some other buildings there, I think from a stylistic perspective, we could really work with something that would blend in really, really well. And we did like the idea of bringing parking back to the rear as well of the property. But we see some good possibilities in the back of that property for generating some income there on the property.
That's a good segue to the other way of thinking about the zone.
So our second way of thinking was, as we've been discussing all day, really is going with the private development. The first thing with the private development is we looked at some ways to maybe subdivide the property, and again, this was not looking at your zoning laws or anything like that, it was just some ideas we were throwing out. And again, that front section, we really want to keep the open space, the entrance into the seminary, the gym. So those we just broke up into 2 big lots. But the back section, again, we thought was a really good developable area. And if this was privatized, we would really want to see an easement or some sort of restriction on the seminary building from an architectural standpoint and from a landscape standpoint. We thought that was really, really important. A lot of people threw out some great ideas. If it were to be privatized, certainly there could be workforce housing or market rate housing, condos, a B&B, everybody talks about that, a hotel or a restaurant. We could have even a school of the arts, some technical training space in there. And again, this is really maximizing the site by building some new construction in the back. Some of the concerns with that might be is, when you're building that new construction in that back lot, you really want to work with some site development so you're not going to be impacting the front without knowing that you're impacting that.
So there's a general range here. One end of the spectrum, it's the town holding on to a large part of the property and controlling it that way. At the other end of the spectrum, it's turning it over to privatized development with, of course, restrictions in certain areas. And so we have this spectrum, and the strategy may slide across that spectrum and be some combination of both of those things. And I guess just to wrap up.
We kind of wanted to present some financial considerations because we heard that's really kind of a lot of the driving force. There tends to be right now a little bit of money in the federal, or excuse me, town-owned side of things. So there could be, we're thinking, some assistance for any sort of hazardous waste material remediation. If you were to tear down the 1960s building, we heard there's probably a lot of, it's been condemned, etc. The Land and Community Heritage Investment Program has been around for a while. You've probably heard of it, LCHIP. They are a great source for municipal-owned or nonprofit buildings, and they would provide money to acquire the site as well as in the future to rehabilitate the site. So that's just a great source of income. Loose plate grants or the conservation license plates. Our office gives grants every year, and I believe your library has gotten one. So that would be another funding source as a municipality that we're owned that way. And actually the bottom one is a certified local government. We only have 21 in our state, and you guys are lucky to be one. And we do have some grants for bricks and mortar as well as for studies. So that's all in regards to being town-owned or municipality-owned. If it were to go to the private developer, certainly there are some incentives for them. One of the biggest ones is the Historic Preservation Tax Incentive Program. That is a federal program, and you might have seen that at the Newmarket Mills, in Dover, in Portsmouth. There certainly are a lot of projects that use it. It's a 20% tax credit, but there are very strict standards for rehabilitating the building according to historic standards. There's housing tax credits through New Hampshire Housing Finance Authority that might be good for some workforce housing, etc. And we mentioned 79E that might help a developer. And oftentimes we're seeing these days, to make these projects work, the developer really needs to utilize as many different incentives as they possibly can. Are we opening it up to bigger questions, Rob?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll let you be the facilitator.
Okay.
We have a,
Okay. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
The municipality section of that slide. Does that apply if it's school district owned as well? Because that's the way it's owned right now. The seminary campus is owned by a school district.
I know that that's been a question with a lot of other communities, and I'm not for certain, but I think the school district might have to partner with the town to make something work, because it has to be a municipality or a nonprofit, so school districts are kind of quasi in there. But I think that there's been some discussion about partnering with towns somehow to make that work. But LCHIP would be the organization that you want to contact first to see if that could happen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, two things. Observations. It's Depot Road, it's not Depot Street.
Sorry.
It's Depot Road, it's not Depot Street.
Okay.
And also, when you talk about doing things in the state park, it's a state park, so the town can't go in and make a playground. And there already is a playground in the park. But I think the concept of developing the state park, I don't think makes sense. Those are just things that
The suggestion for the playground is in the plains, it's not in the state park. The only changes that we're suggesting to the state park might be requests made from the town to the state to either remove the gate or move the gate back and add a little bit of parking, because apparently people already kind of park there already haphazardly. And that would just make the connection a little bit safer, and then the town can add a crosswalk. So that's basically all we're suggesting in the park itself.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the plan. Thanks.
Okay.
I work with the State Historic Preservation Office, and we coordinate with the DRED, Parks and Rec, at least once a month on historic projects. And what I hear through that is that there are quite a number of parks that have some very active friends groups. And DRED and Parks really appreciate that sort of organization to help them. They would like to do more, they just don't have the funding because they're a self-funded system that really hurts the park system. So my suggestion is perhaps if there was some sort of initiative that the town wanted to do, create a friends group, really get together with them and talk about your issues and how you can better provide visitor access, I think they would be more than receptive. So rather than just saying they're the state and can't do anything, I really see some dialogue which would be really, really good.
You have a cleanup every year, and there's stuff to do down in the state park. I mean, people clean up every year. I was there and there other people work, so I understand that it will be.
Any other questions? Okay, I think Deb. Oh, sorry.
Could you just explain your next steps? And I had a question about the Swayze Gym in the Sanborn Seminary campus and the Chase Fields area. Would you recommend, that's a big part of the Sanborn campus? What would you recommend for that space? Is that something you would develop, or?
So I'm going to let these guys take the Swayze Gym, the campus question, and then we'll hand it over to Debbie, and then I'll talk about next steps.
So that's where we really talked about if it was town-owned and kind of partnering with the school district. We heard that the school district still really values that land, so our suggestion was to keep that as recreation. Even if it was in private hands, the smaller section, it could be subdivided. So that was our thought, that keeping those fields and keeping that gym as a public asset was really important. Excuse me? The fields, yes, the fields and the gym. And we were actually hoping to even better provide accessibility between the new area and the fields. I think there's just kind of a walking path, and some thoughts would be to better that access.
Debbie, you want to say something before we wrap up?
Hi, I'm Debbie Powers, Heritage Commission. I think most of you have seen me over the weekend, have a few words to say. First of all, I want to thank the over 200 participants that we've had over the last few days, not counting the people in this room today. I know you're all very interested in the next steps. The next steps is we're going to get the report. We're going to take this video from today We're going to share that with the town of Newton. We're going to share that with the school board, Plan New Hampshire, and shortly when the Kingston cable channel comes back up, we'll have this same video on the cable channel. Now, I am a member of the steering committee that put Envision Kingston II together. Our next steps are going to be, once we get this report, we intend to go to the school and to our boards of selectmen and ask to be members to start looking at these plans and seeing what we think as the group could be implemented, and then coming out to the community asking for support, your ideas again, because we all know that nothing in this town will pass unless it's advertised well, we all understand it, and we agree about it. We've seen incredible things happen with the library because it was well advertised, and that's what we want to do. So we do not want this to end. These are great plans. I thought today was terrific. Walked us through our beautiful town, village, but it also walked us through all the goals and things that we need to do to bring our community back. So we're going to ask and look for support, especially from this group that's here, to come forth and help us do this. I mean, right now, we had a great steering committee. There was about 10 of us, worked really hard just to get us to this point. The real work is coming up. So that's what I wanted to let you know. I wanted to thank this group so much for coming in. Don't like their plans, at least it brought it to our attention, this whole state of what we've got to look and the challenges ahead of us. It's all in one place, instead of, we'll talk about this.
I forgot to ask a question. I was wondering why they were talking about entering off of Depot Street or Depot Road, instead of off of the 125, is that Main Street? What if there was a rationale behind that?
Wasn't it just cleaning up?
Entering the seminary campus. I don't know. Maybe we can look at it with you afterwards, but I'm not sure off the top of my head, sorry.
So that's about it, but thank you all, and thank you all the volunteers.
I think you wrapped it up better than I could have, so thank you very much for having us here. Enjoy the rest of your